I could go back and do something over again, I think I would get someone who knew what they were doing more on the scaling, marketing, growth side earlier. Yeah, I would have done that just because I think it would have helped me avoid a lot of false alleys, rabbit holes, more distillation about what I am, who I am, what I do.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets Podcast. I'm Kevin, and today we are joined by Erin Randall. She has been a coach for over 15 plus years. She's a founder of her coaching business, which I can't pronounce, so I'm going to have her pronounce it. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Well, thank you, Kevin. It's really nice to be here. And for those wondering how you pronounce this name, it's Ad Meliora. And as I was telling Kevin earlier, it's Latin for to better things. So this is really my work around better things. How do you bring those about? So Ad Meliora Coaching. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm so curious, while we're talking about your coaching business, tell me the origin story about how you became a coach and how you came up with this name. I'm so curious.
Well, how I became a coach, a lot of people ask me because I do get that question a lot. They're like, I was headed down this software track, and that was primarily where my work had been. And I had been working with software teams for a fair while at that point. But then in 2013, my father had a stroke, and he was a veterinarian in rural Montana. And so for the next couple of years, I was both IBM and this rural veterinary practice. And so going back and forth. And that really, unfortunately, gave me the impetus to learn to lead and to work and to think in different ways. Because it required such different things of me and asked different things of me, that's how I jumped. That was the initial setting a different track there. But the practice name came about just because when I was starting to think about what do I call this business that I'm about to found, that I'm about to create, all the really great stuff it felt like was taken, in visionary coaching or something like that. And so we just flat went back to the Latin. And that was where Ad Meliora came up, was from there. So it doesn't have a sexy name or anything like that or a sexy founding story, but that was it because no one else claimed the Latin.
So when you transition, thank you for the origin story, by the way. And so as you transition full-time into kind of like your coaching business, how did you figure out like who you kind of wanted to help and who do you help and what do you help them with?
The early days of starting anything, for me at least, were bumpy because my philosophy was, if you will hold still, I can coach. And that was really a terrible philosophy there at the very beginning because I wasn't clear about who I was and what I was doing and the work that I was doing. And it took me a lot of falling down in order to finally get back up and to do that work the way I wanted to, mindfully and well and very thoughtfully, and thinking about the impact that I wanted to have. So to answer that question, what is my work? It's really about serving teams and people, boards, organization, helping them to have the impact that they want to have. How do they want to make a difference? And so my work is helping to make that come about. And sometimes that means that I coach the entire organization, or sometimes I'm really focusing deep with one team. It might be the leadership team, it might be the advisory board, it might be coaching a department head, it might be working with, female directors and the like. But what is the impact you want to have and helping that to come about?
How did you discover this like target market or the people that you wanted to help or organizations that you wanted?
Because I sat down and I started doing an analysis of my network and the people that were coming to me more repeatedly and regularly, and who were they beginning to refer in, and doing just kind of the deep dive on that. That was what kind of tweaked that little bit there. It's like, okay, Erin, you seem to be heading this way anyway, and that's the work you really like doing. So one leads to the other, bring it up there. And from that standpoint there, I also do a fair amount of work with academia, and that was an offshoot that I had not ever foreseen. It came about, and it's kind of one of those things that snowball. And then through the joys of search engine optimization and the like, you get some occasionally strange calls like landing on my calendar going, I don't even know anyone at that university. How did that come about? And they're like, oh, I found you. I'm like, okay, great. But that work is just as rewarding, but in a very different way. I mean, how do you help a researcher? How do you be a more productive researcher? What does it mean to be a teacher, a researcher, a mentor, a leader, and to help shape the people that will come after? I would have
That's
never
really,
foreseen that side of things, but it does account for a fair amount of my work every week.
yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned SEO, so let's kind of talk about marketing. How do people find you in the first place, about your services and all that?
The honest answer there, Kevin, is marketing. This is something I do not do well. This is something I struggle with, and this is something I actively try to get help with because it is not something I'm great at. So earlier I had talked a little bit about my dad, who was a veterinarian in very rural Montana. And that was an experiment on so many things, but I cannot forget I had to go advertise in the newspaper again up there. So when my dad had that stroke, I had to run an ad in the paper saying, rumors of my demise are greatly exaggerated. Please call the veterinary clinic for an appointment, because my dad had been the vet for 40 years up here, serving 3 states and counties and everyone. And people were calling this vet clinic crying because they thought he was dead. I'm like, no, he's not dead, but we're having to retrench and we have to hire new veterinarians and we're having to really shift this practice. So I had to go advertise in a paper, apologies to Mark Twain, that, hey, we're still here, we're still open.
Mm,
You take that experience of marketing there, what does it mean to market now? And many coaches, myself probably at the forefront of that line, this is not something I do well.
mm.
And how many of us know that there are things we don't do well, but it's uncomfortable to not do things well. So we're going to go focus on the thing that we like doing. And then we're like, oh, we're good at that part. I remember my dad one time saying, he's like, I just want to be a veterinarian. And I'm over here looking at, we've got staff, we've got buildings, we've got outbuildings. You need to go work on this thing. And I'm like, Dad, that ship sailed. That ship sailed, completely different metaphor, but I need you to also be, you own this and this. So SEO, boy, Kevin, when I get a good answer to that one day, I'll let you know. But whoever does the background work on some of my website to make that SEO happen, good job then. Yeah.
You know what's really interesting? Like the way that you described that experience with your dad's vet practice. It reminds me of the old copywriting books where they were like writing newspaper ads and stuff like that back in the day.
I did that. I had to do
Yeah.
that. And because there was a fair amount of that practice that was around artificial insemination. I know this is coming off coaching, but it is kind of interesting in the sense that for, a few years there, my life, in addition to managing releases for IBM, and I had teams in Japan and I had them in Germany and we had a big team in the US and everybody every place else. But I was also, is that animal pregnant? How's the pregnancy going? When is it going to give birth? How did the birth go? When could we do this again? And so I would be one person, at IBM, and then I would have to shift tracks completely to go be someone else the rest of the day.
Mm,
And it oddly gave me an incredible amount of confidence around the things that I could do that I just had formerly never tried. And without that experience of leading, of trying, of failing, of getting back up, I don't know that I would have had the wherewithal to be like, you know what? I'm going to go start my own practice. I'm going to go start doing this for real on my own and make this go. So I'm deeply grateful to that experience. Though if I'm also honest, if it meant that my father would not have had a stroke, I would give it all back in a heartbeat. I would,
mm,
just because it had such a big effect on him. Yeah.
yeah. As you reflect on that experience, what kind of skills do you feel like you kind of built or developed during that time that were applicable to your coaching practice?
Leadership, negotiation, strategy. We already talked a little bit about the marketing side of that. Hiring. It made me look at teams in a different way. Community. It also made me take a different look at community because this was an area in which I had grown up, but I had never thought that I would really return to on a regular basis other than to see my parents. And there was a large number of people in that ranching community that had my back in ways that you would never suspect just because they knew that I was over there trying to hold the line, to help keep them going. They were trying to help keep me going too. So it was not uncommon to people would call and ask and just I had a lot of support.
Yeah. Sounds like you learned a lot of the core business fundamentals to that. And like, really,
Accounting. Oh, I forgot to mention accounting. What does it look like to write things off? What does it look like to change accountants? What does it look like to look at our books and be like, okay, here's where we are. What do we need to do? I had never paid attention to financials before that ever. And now I'm like, okay, what can we afford? What do we need to do? What choices do we need to make? And I look now, and this really has laid the groundwork for how do I think about strategy and what is there and what is possible. I'd already been good with doing the visioning side of things. How do you want to envision this change? What do you see? There's that pull star there for that aspect. But what are the levers that you have as a leader in the background that are going to make that decision possible or that outcome possible and the like? And this is also where I would tell people to, if you're ever thinking about starting your own coaching practice, please make certain you have a good accountant. Please go get one. There's terms and places for outside help, and accounting is one of them. Yes.
great advice.
Marketing is another good one to get some help.
Let's talk about the marketing for a second. Like, because I'm curious because you said I'm not that great at marketing. And so, but you have a business. And so, how are people discovering you, I guess? Are you doing like LinkedIn posts? Are you getting referrals? Especially early days. Yeah.
I would also tell people that the most interesting time to start a business is at the dawn of a pandemic. February of 2020 is when I really went out hard on my own, and we all know what happened later in February of 2020. Yes. I've had people literally look at me and like, that was either the stupidest choice ever or the best choice ever. Which is it? And I'm like, well, I'm actually leaning towards the latter, but I can understand where you might get to the former on that. Initially, I just went out and I did demo work in front of, if I had an email address or a phone number on you, I did the work in front of you. And you're like, okay, that's what she's doing. And it kind of, just trickled forward a bit from there. Most of my work now at this point comes from referrals from other clients who've seen me do something, or they're like, that sounds like something Erin's been doing over there on that side of it. There can be all the marketing in the world, but unless you can back it up with excellent, high quality delivery, it makes the marketing, fade just a bit or ring hollow. So most of my work has to come from people who have been extraordinarily happy with the impact that has had. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So people,
I'm curious, do other people say something else? Do other people see marketing differently?
I think you're the first person that is just like, I'm just not good at marketing and whatnot. And it's just really interesting to see like, because that's not it's kind of interesting. That's not what I see, I guess, like from my end. So it's interesting to see your own perception of like.
No, literally, for me, market is not something I've ever studied. It's not something I've ever done other than, the, newspaper ad and the like. But I do get up regularly and speak and talk and present and do that work. So it's not that I mind getting up in front of large crowds and doing that work. But I have never sat down and done a drawn out marketing plan of that. I've experimented with small form video around trying to help people ask better questions. But the truth of the matter about questions is there's no one perfect question. It's always going to be around in that moment, how do you connect? What is the thing that needs to be asked that people have been afraid to ask? And so I've tried a few different things. And I know that I can write and I can do blog posts and I've done that in the past as well. I've never done the full plan to help me achieve something that I'm working on. And it's kind of, I just want to be a veterinarian. All right. Well, for me, okay, yes, going and coaching and working with teams, I would vastly prefer to go do that. And so that's what I tend to do. Probably shooting myself in the foot, more times than not by not focusing on some of those weaker points. But I also have to deliver high quality. I mean, if that work is not of the standard that I want to call it, I kind of just felt my bottom drop out from under me. I'm like, oh, yeah, that would be really
What happened?
hard. Well,
What
no, it
happened?
was just if I was ever thinking that I was not delivering what I wanted to for a system or a client or an individual, that would be really hard for me. That would be very hard for me.
One thing I'm really interested about is like, okay, so you're getting referrals, you're doing the speaking, people are interested in you, and they're starting to work with you.
Mhm.
And so you mentioned a few different modalities that you use. You said that you help organizations sometimes. Sometimes you might do one-on-one coaching. Do you also do like things like group coaching? I'm just kind of
I
curious.
do.
What are all the coaching
I've
modalities
I've
that you use?
experimented with lots of different things. So if you think
Ooh,
about, I have for a few years I ran a program called Magnesium, and it was group coaching where everyone's doing the same work but wanting a different outcome. Okay, so that's group coaching. There's team where you've got a group of 5, 7, 9 people working there with them, doing the work that for that team. There's the deep one-on-one work, whether it's a leader or a director or a researcher there. And sometimes it's really stepping back and looking at an organization as the whole, reading what is happening there, sensing what is happening in that system, probing, asking questions, talking to people, and where are they out of alignment? All right. So I think part of the reason I experiment with so many different things is so that I'm always going to be comfortable no matter which role I step into for that particular system. Because if I'm out of sync with it, it shows up. And so that's why I try doing the different things. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah. I love the whole experiment. I'm not sure if the word is experimentation, but it seems like you use the right modality for use the modality that's needed for the client or project that you're working on.
That's my aim. That's what I want to do. There's that saying, I think it's a Japanese saying, fall 7, rise 8. I don't care if it's fall 785, you rise 786. Okay, you're going to get kicked by different things. And some experiments that I'm going to try, they're not going to work. I'll be like, okay, I need to let that go. What do I want to try now? And that is, I think, part of our work on this side. If you were ever going to be doing coaching work or kind of stepping over into consulting or teaching or facilitating or whatever that is, I need a really deep chest of tools from which to operate. And that might
Mm,
mean sometimes I'm working very much within clean language. Or in other times, what does somatic coaching teach me about this?
mm.
Or, what books am I reading that give me different outsight into this particular system?
One of the things I'm really interested in is like I would love your insight on this. One of the things that a lot of coaches listening to this struggle with a lot is pricing strategies. And of course, you don't need to give any hard numbers, but since you have so many different modalities and you mentioned experimenting and you gave that Japanese
Yeah.
proverb earlier, right? I guess like what different pricing strategies have you experimented with and which ones have you kind of gravitated to over the years?
When I first began work, just the idea of putting a number, the work that I could do with someone, that was really difficult. So I started low. And then I realized, oh, I'm really getting pretty good at this. And I've been good at this. No, this number needs to be higher. And so there are different numbers for different things and the like. But mostly if I'm ever working, big organizational work, I like to do just, this is my day rate. Okay. And whatever happens in that day, that's the day rate because it just keeps things simpler for me and them and the like. And it just goes from there. So that might mean, I'm there on site I will work with this team at this point, and then I step back and I go have a deep one-on-one conversation over here with this particular leader. Or if I'm working over here with someone in a different team, is there teaching that needs to happen in that moment around possibly a different way to do some of the work there? So for me, a day rate works best, particularly if I'm going to be on site with a client. Yeah. And the only way to get to those numbers is try it and see if it sticks. But I mean, I've also done the work on my side to make certain that my skills and abilities are, high notch. They're top notch, because it does take a lot of work. It does take a lot of practice. It does take, well, frankly, also a lot of chutzpah sometimes, just to go be like, okay, I'm going to go stand up in front of this, and this is the work that we're going to do. Yeah.
The thing that I'm thinking about is like, it seems like the level of your work is very intimate. You're talking organizations and breaking out to do one-on-ones and all that. And so I guess, how do you kind of manage your current client capacity?
And this is where all of those years with working agile delivery for teams comes in very handy, and I still run Kanban boards of my own work to this day. And I think about what is the relative amount of effort that it will take to go in and do some of this. And I break things down, and I notice I have just kind of an internal threshold. And if it starts getting too much, it starts to vibrate and I start getting I'm just off. And so I need to pull back on that. I can handle, a certain number of clients, but if I also sense that one particular client is going to require more of me, it means I need to ratchet back in other areas, and there's communication that needs to go and be like, hey, I need to be over here for a little bit. I'm still here, but I'm going to be, focusing more on this week. But it also means that I need to, for example, next week I'm going to be hiking in Oregon for a few days. So I know the kind of off time that I need in order to be on in front of a system. So, but yeah, it always comes back to that relative sizing. What is the effort is going to take to get something done? Just the practice of doing that. Yeah, it's a good lesson from old days of, agile practices that I still use today.
Yeah, you have quite the impressive resume. I was looking at your LinkedIn. I was like, "Ooh, Scrum Master, all this sort of stuff." Like, I was looking through all your.
Those old days, yeah. Well, to be honest, that is the work that in a large part made, switching tracks possible. Because for a long time I'd been writing those massive technical documentation guides that no one ever wants to read, and you get very angry whenever you can't figure out how to do something, so you go read the help. I used to do that for a long time. I started looking down the road. I'm like, yeah, this is a job that's going to go away. So I need to be thinking about what I need to make happen next. And we had a new CTO come in, and the person that was going to do some of that work left. So I volunteered for it. And so for a couple of years there, I was doing two jobs. That's sometimes how you make the track jump. Makes it possible. Yeah. Yeah, those early years of Scrum mastering many teams helps me to understand capacity, what needs to happen, but also taught me to listen differently to systems and how they work.
Something I'm very curious about, because you said, I think one of the first things you said on this podcast was like, you help organizations make their impact and all that. And so it makes me wonder about your future goals, and I guess, where do you want your coaching business to take you in the next few years? Do you have any secret dreams, big ambitions, desire to scale? I would love to hear.
I do. So in other words, what am I working towards? I want to be a TEDx speaker. And so I'm working on that right now. You'd asked about scaling, and yes, but I'm going to answer that slightly differently. I don't want just more engagements or more engagements at a certain financial level. What I'm looking for are more high impact engagements. And by that, I mean, work that is going to make a difference to either a community or to a country or to the people that work serves. So yes, there's always going to be money involved with that. But more than anything, I want those high impact engagements. And I would also like my French to be at a point where I wouldn't have to think about the verb tense before I use the sentence. So that's something just on the side I'm working on as well.
It's really interesting. When you say like high impact, well, the French part was really interesting too. But then when you talk about high impact engagements, what comes to mind? Do you have like a dream like client
Like a
or
dream
dream?
client?
or organization or like what does that look like?
Sometimes that work is, it's with large companies that are trying to do things differently that will impact not just their region, but their country.
Mm,
And so at that level. But sometimes it also means that I do take a look at and work with nonprofits who were reshaping how people communicate with one another. So earlier I referenced clean language as one of the foundations in which I'm basing a lot of my work. And how do we tie that clean language aspect in to help communities learn to listen to one another differently? So it's not like I'm going to give you a name of a company or an organization or and the like. I
when
think
you're thinking,
many of us are always working. We plant trees under which we will not enjoy the shade. And that's what I'm doing is, by having those high impact engagements, how do we help plant a forest? How do we help people learn to care for a forest? How do we help people learn to live in a forest? Does that make sense?
very beautiful. It almost feels like I really relate to it because it's like a lot of Asian thinking. It's super, super long term, very legacy focused. Even the Japanese business plan, it's like 100 years long or it's 100 years out and stuff like that.
Right.
It's just really
Well, a long
interesting.
time ago, I used to be in the Peace Corps and I served in Outer Mongolia. And so it's one of my favorite things about my work at Oxford right now is that one of my classmates is Mongolian. And, to see that was just, oh no, it's fantastic. And she does really wonderful work through the Mongol Ecology Center. And you can see her living that out there. I'm just widely read. I'm one of those nut jobs that I read pretty much whatever I can get my hands on, be it history or poetry or drama or listen to a book. So, yeah.
Definitely shows if you have a company name in Latin. It definitely shows. It takes a certain personality.
Well, everyone, if it's any consolation, my husband stumbles over how to pronounce that. Most people just like, Aaron, can you just go, you say it. Like,
Just
an early version of you said no. An early
embarrassing
version
part.
of our website literally had the phonetics, how to say this because I got the question so often, and it never fails that whenever someone asks me to say it, then I stumble over it, and I'm like, oh great, now even I can't say it, but it's the
Aaron,
gem of the day.
yeah, I want to move on to the next section. Let's play a
Mhm.
game if you're open to it.
Let's play a game.
Yeah. So I learned this game through a master storyteller. His name is Matthew Dix, but the game is called First, Last, Best, Worst. And I want to use this game to kind of like get stories of business investments. So, a lot of coaches, they invest into coaching, training,
Hmm.
marketing, team members, anything like that. So I want to get your take. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say a phrase and I just want the first thought that comes to mind. First business investment you remember.
Training foundational skills so that I could learn to do this work better.
What year was that, the first year of coaching?
Yes, because I was desperately afraid. What was really happening, I'll be honest, Kevin, was that I was having colleagues come in and they would cry with me. They were coming in and they were just, they were not. And I'm like, oh, I need some very different initials. And I'm not a therapist and I'm not a counselor, but I knew that I needed to be able to hold that space differently. And so I went, and that was when I obtained my CTI, Coactive Training Institute certification around coaching, so that at least I could say I was doing this work ethically and mindfully and well. So that was the first.
Last business investment you made.
Well, it's the investment that I'm still living out, which is going to Oxford. Again, kind of ties into training, but I made this investment in my work because I knew it would open up different ways for me to think and shore up areas in which I have been notoriously weak. And so that's why I made that investment. And while I will continue to do so. Yeah. Go big. Go big.
I think you're the first person that said Oxford on this podcast. By the way, I never got that response, but we'll move on.
You probably never got the veterinarian story either about,
No, artificial insemination and all that. I wasn't expecting that,
oh
to be
yeah,
honest.
I know. I have some very interesting skills. Best
Best business investment.
accounting. Yeah, getting an accountant. I am not good at that. I am not financially savvy on that side. And so having an accountant for me that I could also see as a business partner that could help me make better accounting decisions, that has been a very good investment for me.
Okay, worst business investment that you kind of want your money back from.
I won't name names, but there has been some training and certification that I've done that I have never used since. And it's really just it was like, blah. Can I have like a 1B to my worst answer as well? If I could go back and do something over again, I think I would get someone who knew what they were doing more on the scaling, marketing, growth side earlier. Yeah, I would have done that just because I think it would have helped me avoid a lot of false alleys, rabbit holes, more distillation about what I am, who I am, what I do. So there's a 1A and a 1B to that.
So as you're sharing these stories, I guess like how has your decision making process changed over the years and what to invest in and what not to invest in?
I don't know that my decision making process has changed. I have never been one of those people for whom making a decision was difficult or traumatic. I look at my options and I make the decision that I feel will serve best at that time. What I think I do differently now is I take a longer range view and think about the outcomes that I see, which are pertinent to, we're going back to that high impact again, the impact that I want to have. An impact is different than legacy, but that's a conversation for a different day. It's better about keeping my focus from here too much and keeping it at this level more and longer range, because that is incredibly important. Standing up and seeing from a different perspective what is out there and what is coming. Yeah.
Beautiful stuff. You stole my last question. I was going to ask you, what would you do differently if you had to start all over again in the first 90 days? But I think you answered it earlier.
Don't get me wrong. I have no regrets about what I've done and why. I made the best decision that I could at the time. And it's, how I get back up matters. And, I try to model that for my clients as well. I think it's important, in doing this work that people also see me taking the big swings at things. And sometimes I'm going to miss, but sometimes I'm not. And how am I going to handle that in those moments? That is some advice I guess I would give to my slightly younger self, though, is, getting help on the things that are difficult. I should have learned that lesson differently from my father. I just want to be a veterinarian. Well, Dad, that ship sailed. All right, I want to coach. All right, well, then where do I need help so that I can spend more of my time coaching and less of my time doing the things that are not in my wheelhouse? Yeah.
Erin, I'm not sure if anybody ever told you this, but you're actually a really great storyteller.
It will make getting to that TEDx stage then one day that much easier. Yeah.
You definitely have to
It
talk
does
about
help
the
though. I mean,
vet
I do have some
practice for
fairly
sure.
entertaining stories over the years, yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that
Yeah.
compliment though.
Erin, how do people find you and connect with you?
How do people find me? Well, there is, the practice of saying Ad Meliora a lot. So I do have a website, obviously www.admelioracoaching.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I am available there and you'll see me doing work with different global coaching circles. So if you ever just want to see my work and how I'm teaching some of this, people can go find me there. You could find me doing different clean language work and seeing that and practicing that work. You'll see me also doing that work, teaching that through CRR Global as well. But the best way to find me is just to email me. And judging by all the people that spam me with all different things, I'm a little hesitant to ever give my email address out loud, but you can also contact me off my website. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. I feel
Like,
like, honestly,
my inbox does not have enough problems with people. And I'm like, okay. Yeah.
like, I feel like I could go another 2 stories. Definitely one of the most unique personalities I've had, like, on this podcast with very great storytelling, like I said. But yeah,
Thank you.
honestly, I can't wait to see you on the TEDx stage or even like have your own
Oh, I'll let you
podcast.
know when I get on the TEDx stage. I do have a topic I'm starting to noodle around. People talk about, it's like no one understands my point of view or no one's understanding. what it's like to be me. I'm like, okay, but what is the work you have done to go stand in other? How do we learn to give first in order to soften this environment so that people can go stand in other? And sadly, we're seeing this play out here in the United States around, whether it's political violence or anger or just, the polarization of different communities. But how are we standing in other? Okay, let me go do that work first, and then I can have, but I don't know anyone who's like, okay, I'm going to go be awkward first. I'm going to go stand there and learn what it's like to be you so that maybe you're willing to understand what it's like to be me. So once I get up on the TEDx stage, I'll send you a link and you can send that out too.
For sure.
So if anybody knows how to get me on a TEDx stage, feel free to connect with me.
Cool, Erin. Thank you again so much for coming
Thank
on
you.
this
This was
podcast.
really lovely, Kevin. I really appreciate
Yeah.
this time. Thanks.
Yeah, I had a blast too. Take care.
You too.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.